My name is Victoria. I am 30 years old. We have a family business. Well, how can I put it? Our father always said that everything would be fair and equal. My sister didn't work much, and I did all the work. When I accidentally found out that my father had transferred everything to my sister, he didn't even realize that I would stop saving the company and tell him who should run it now. Before I tell you this unfair story, subscribe so you don't miss other similar stories, and stay up to date. Most kids remember the smell of cookies or crayons when they think of childhood. I remember the stale air of conference rooms and the bite of fresh toner ink. While other children built tree houses, I built trust funds on toy spreadsheets, sitting cross-legged under my father's mahogany desk. That was my playground. My name is Victoria Morrow, and I was raised not by bedtime stories or lullabies, but by cash flow statements and shareholder reports. The family business was never just a business. It was my birthright, my destiny. Or so I was told. From the moment I could walk, I was treated like the heir. "She's sharp, just like her father," they'd say in board meetings, where I'd sit silently, pretending not to listen as I scribbled stick figures on the back of financial reports. I was praised for my precision, for my seriousness. "She's got the Morrow blood," my father would beam, while my sister Emily was off finger painting or daydreaming about becoming a novelist. Emily was the butterfly. I was the blueprint. By the time I was 12, I could recite our top 5 clients from memory and spot an over-budget line item from across the room. I missed school dances to stay late with Dad, helping organize year-end invoices or correcting clerical errors in dusty filing cabinets. I didn't resent it. I wore it like armor. Every hour I gave was an act of love. And he promised. God, he promised. "This will all be yours, one day," he said so often it might as well have been carved above the office door. I carried those words like scripture. It's why I turned down Columbia and then Goldman Sachs. Why I ignored 6-figure offers after Wharton, graduating summa cum laude with a glowing future already waiting at my feet. But I didn't want their future. I wanted his approval. So I came back home. I signed no contract. I asked for no salary. I walked into Morrow & Co. like a soldier reporting for duty. I worked 90-hour weeks like it was a badge of honor. I missed birthdays, weddings, even my best friend's funeral. I was always in the office, early mornings, late nights, holidays. My life didn't pause. It disappeared. And he let it. No thank yous, no bonuses, just next quarter, and we're almost there. People would ask, "Don't you ever take time for yourself?" As if self mattered. As if I wasn't investing in the legacy he promised me. I laughed it off. "I'm not working for a paycheck," I'd say. "I'm working for an empire." What a lie that turned out to be. But at the time, I didn't know. At the time, I still believed I was chosen. Looking back now, I realize there were cracks. Moments I swallowed instead of questioned. Like the time he told a client that Emily had a creative vision this company desperately needs. Like when he skipped my quarterly review to take her to lunch. Or how every time I mentioned succession planning, he changed the subject. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," he'd say, even after a decade of devotion. But I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to. Because if I saw it, really saw it, I'd have to face the unbearable truth. That maybe I was never the heir. Maybe I was just free labor. Mia returned like a whirlwind, late as always, dramatic as ever. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the elevator doors opened and she stepped into the office like she was walking onto a stage. Tousled curls, designer sunglasses perched on her head, silk scarf tied loosely around her neck. Like she'd just stepped out of a movie about glamorous heartbreak. One look and everyone forgot we were in the middle of a budget crisis. "I'm back," she announced, arms outstretched like someone might throw her a parade. No one did. But they smiled. And not just politely. Real smiles. I stood up from my desk instinctively, my fingers still poised on the keyboard. 10 hours deep into contract revisions, eyes sore from the screen, stomach hollow from skipping lunch again. She hadn't even taken off her coat before 3 people were offering coffee, compliments, and catch-ups. Mia had been gone for nearly 2 years, traveling across Europe with her now ex, Hugo, some Belgian gallery genius, who couldn't commit to anything beyond free wine and open mic nights. The last I heard, they were living in a converted boat in Amsterdam. She sent postcards like apologies, ink-blurred promises to visit, casual mentions of rooftop poetry readings in Barcelona and midnight swims in Marseille. Meanwhile, I held this place together. When I finally approached, she pulled me into a hug that smelled like French perfume and guilt. "Vic, you look so powerful," she said, and I couldn't decide if it was a compliment or a well-aimed dart. She held my arms out and examined me like I was a museum piece she wasn't sure she liked. "Are you still wearing pantsuits? God, you really leaned into this CEO and training aesthetic, huh?" I smiled, tight-lipped. "Welcome home, Mia." That night at dinner, Dad cleared his throat dramatically over the roast chicken, his version of a formal announcement. "Your mother and I have decided to create a new position at the company." Of course they had. He glanced at Mia like she was a lottery ticket he couldn't wait to cash. "Director of Brand Vision." Mia giggled. "Wow, that sounds important." "It is," Mom said quickly. "We've been too focused on the logistics side. We need someone who sees the feel of the company, not just the numbers. Someone intuitive." I chewed my salad a little too aggressively. "So, what exactly will that entail?" Mia shrugged. "I don't know. I guess I'll figure it out." "She'll help us modernize," Mom added. "Marketing, image, client experience." I had been handling marketing and client experience and everything else. But I said nothing, because in that moment, I didn't feel angry, not even hurt, just tired. Mia started showing up at the office the next week, late, of course, sipping cold brews with elaborate foam art and carrying a leather-bound sketchbook she never opened. She took meetings that felt more like brunches, interrupted serious calls with loud laughter, and floated from office to office like a visiting celebrity. And somehow, everyone loved it. "She's such a breath of fresh air," the receptionist whispered once. "So creative," one of the senior partners said. "Just what we needed." Dad beamed. "I always knew she had a unique spark." They forgot to mention she couldn't finish a single report, or that she left early almost every day, or that she changed the lobby art to some abstract nightmare that looked like spilled wine. I kept my head down. I told myself I was above it, that this was temporary, that I wasn't jealous, because how could I be? I had built this place from the inside out. I had sacrificed everything. I knew every client, every policy, every process. Mia was a tourist, a distraction. She couldn't take my place. Could she? I kept telling myself no, that my father would never forget what I'd done, that deep down he respected my work ethic more than her charm, that surely he saw the difference. But sometimes, when I passed by his office and saw them laughing together, his face so light, so proud, I felt a sliver of something I couldn't name. Not jealousy, not yet. Just the first crack, the whisper of a shift. And the worst part? Mia didn't even know she was breaking anything. It started as just another late night. The office was silent, save for the soft hum of printers in sleep mode and the occasional creak of old air ducts. The kind of stillness that used to comfort me. The kind that whispered I was the only one who cared enough to stay late, to hold this place together. My father's kingdom, my legacy. I had stayed behind to finalize contract revisions for the Hartwell account, our biggest client. The file server was slow, and I was too exhausted to dig through the chaos of our new creative reorganization system. Mia's latest contribution to the company's brand vision, which basically meant everyone was encouraged to abandon our reliable filing methods in favor of scattered, intuitive placement. Whatever that meant. I opened the wrong cabinet. Or maybe it was the right one. I was reaching for a backup copy of a contract. What I found instead was a thick, leather-bound folder with a shiny label that caught the light. Ownership Transition Documents, Morrow & Co. My heart skipped. I thought maybe it was a backup of the succession plan I'd been begging Dad to finalize for years. My breath caught in my throat. Was this it? Was this the night everything was finally made official? I sat down with the folder, hands trembling slightly as I flipped to the first page. Transfer of ownership agreement, 75%. Majority stake to Polly Mia Morrow. My brain stalled. Polly? Mia. She wasn't just back. She wasn't just playing dress-up in the family business. She owned it. I flipped faster, frantic, the edges of the pages slicing at my fingers as I scanned clause after clause. 75% ownership. Effective 6 months ago. Witnessed by our attorney. Signed by both my parents. Filed. Finalized. No mention of me. Not once. Not even a footnote. The air in the room grew impossibly thin. I stood up too quickly and had to grip the edge of the desk to steady myself. My ears rang. My vision blurred. I blinked hard, hoping I'd misread something. That this was some kind of draft. A mistake. A bad dream. But it was real. I sank back into the chair, folder still clutched in my lap, now hot in my hands, like it had burned the future out of me. They didn't even tell me. Not a conversation, not a warning, not even a lie to soften the blow. They just rewrote everything, quietly, completely. A laugh escaped me, sharp, humorless, surreal. 10 years, 10 years, 90-hour weeks, no salary, no vacations, no relationship that survived more than 6 months. I missed my own goddamn 30th birthday because Dad needed help preparing a merger proposal. And all this time, they were celebrating Mia, creating roles for her, praising her vision, handing her the keys to everything I built while she was gallivanting through Europe in linen dresses, collecting heartbreaks and half-finished poems. I couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in. Or maybe I was shrinking, drowning in fluorescent light and betrayal. And then the voices. From the hallway. "I don't think she'll care," someone said. It was Cheryl from legal. "She doesn't even ask questions. That's the thing about Victoria," someone else replied. "She just works." Laughter. Low, casual, complicit. They all knew. The receptionist. Legal. Even the IT guy, probably. They watched me work myself into dust. They watched me give my entire identity to this place, this dream, this promise. And they said nothing, because they knew it was never mine. I couldn't stay. I grabbed the folder, stuffed it into my bag like a weapon, and walked out. My heels clicked too loud on the marble floor. I didn't say goodbye to the security guard. I didn't even hit the elevator button. I took the stairs. 4 flights. Shaking. Outside, the city air slapped my face, sharp and wet with drizzle. I kept walking. Past the coffee shop where I'd taken Dad's calls every Sunday. Past the dry cleaner, who always rushed my blazers because you Morrow girls always mean business. Not tonight. Tonight, I was no one. No heir, no daughter. Just a fool who believed a lie for too long. When I finally stopped walking, I didn't know where I was. Some quiet street. My hands were still clutching the bag. My phone buzzed. Probably Dad. Or Mia. Or someone asking where the hell I went and whether I could still make that 8 a.m. call with the Hartwells. I powered it off. For the first time in years, I stopped being the person who picked up the pieces. Let Mia take care of it. She's the owner, right? Let her finally earn the thing she was handed on a silver platter. I kept walking. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if my shoes were filled with concrete and regret. Somewhere between block 6 and 7, the memories started crashing over me like waves I couldn't dodge. I remembered the first proposal I ever wrote for the company. I was 23, fresh out of Wharton, wearing a blazer too stiff for my shoulders, and carrying a binder I stayed up all night perfecting. I presented it to Dad in the boardroom at 7 a.m., before the office even opened. He barely glanced at it, but told me I had initiative. That was enough. I kept going. I remembered staying in the office for 42 straight hours during the Anderson acquisition talks. I brushed my teeth in the women's restroom, used dry shampoo, and survived on granola bars and black coffee. When the deal finally closed, Dad shook the client's hand like he saved it himself. He didn't even mention me in the recap email. I remembered missing Lara's wedding, my best friend since middle school, because we had a surprise audit, and no one else knew how to handle the documentation. I sent a gift, an apology, and a promise to catch up. We never really did. And then Mia. Mia, who strolled in 6 months ago wearing a sundress and a newfound passion for branding, who left early every Friday because she worked better in cozy spaces, and who literally once asked me what the difference was between gross margin and net profit. I remembered watching her change the art in the lobby, ripping down the tasteful black and white skyline for some hideous splash of abstract color, and being told it was an elevation of our visual identity. I remembered her being late to every single strategy meeting and still getting applauded for her authentic voice. I remembered designing the client retention strategy from scratch. I remembered working through the flu. I remembered crying in the parking garage one Christmas Eve because Dad asked me to fix an investor pitch deck instead of going to dinner with Mom. God, I remembered everything. 10 years. Over 30,000 hours. No pay, no stock, no title that meant anything. And for what? So Mia could walk in, smile, and inherit it all with a fresh coat of lip gloss? I gave my 20s to this company. Mia gave it an Instagram filter. That was the truth. The unbearable, vicious truth. And what hurt the most wasn't just that they gave it to her. It was that they never intended to give it to me. They just used me to keep the lights on until she was ready. And when she was, they switched the narrative overnight. Like I was never even part of the story. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. I couldn't. I lay in my apartment, silent, lights off, the folder propped up on my coffee table like a bomb I hadn't diffused. I kept thinking, maybe there was still some missing page, some addendum, a footnote I'd missed. Maybe I misunderstood. But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. So I waited until Sunday evening, our usual family dinner, a tradition my mother insisted on maintaining like it was sacred. The moment I walked into their house, folder in hand, the air shifted. Mom was setting the table with the good china. Mia was sipping wine in bare feet, humming along to some mellow playlist. Dad was finishing his drink by the fireplace, relaxed, like the world was exactly as it should be. "Vic," Mom said brightly. "So glad you made it. I was starting to worry." I dropped the folder on the dining room table. The sound snapped the air in half. Mia stopped humming. My father turned slowly. Mom froze with a stack of napkins in her hand. I didn't sit down. I didn't smile. I opened the folder, flipped it around, and slid it across the table. "Would someone like to explain this to me?" Dad's eyes narrowed. He didn't look surprised. Mia blinked. "What is that?" "Don't," I snapped. "Don't pretend you don't know." Dad stood. He didn't touch the folder. "Victoria?" he began, voice firm, low, like I was a staffer who'd overstepped. "This wasn't meant to come out like this." "No kidding," I said. My voice cracked around the edges, but I kept it steady. 6 months ago, you made her majority owner, 75%. Without a word to me, I worked for you for 10 years. Without pay, without a title, without ever asking for more than what you promised me. "It's not about the past," Dad said. "It's all about the past," I shot back. "It's about every night I slept in that damn office, every contract I wrote, every weekend I gave up while she was learning to pronounce branding in French cafes." "Victoria," my mother started, trying to smooth the tension like she always did. "Your father didn't mean to hurt you." "I'm not done," I said, louder than I intended. "I just want to hear it. From you." "Why? Why her?" Dad didn't blink. "Because she understands the future. This company needs vision, innovation. You're dependable, but too traditional, rigid. You can't pivot." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Too traditional, too rigid, too loyal maybe, too invisible. I modernized every department," I hissed. I saved us from 3 major losses. I doubled client retention in 2 years. But she gets rewarded because she paints mood boards and says things like, user experience? She brings something different, Dad said flatly. She brings wine and buzzwords. Mia finally spoke, her voice small, almost pleading. Vic, I didn't ask for this. I didn't even know the details until… Until what? Until you signed the papers? I glared at her. You knew enough to cash in. I never meant to hurt you, she said, biting her lip. I thought maybe this would finally bring us closer. I laughed, a horrible broken sound. You thought stealing my future would make us closer? Victoria, Mom said again, her voice cracking now. Please, let's just sit. Let's talk through this. I looked at her, then at Mia, then finally at Dad, and in that moment I realized they weren't surprised I found out. They were surprised I was fighting back. I stood up straighter. I quit, I said. The words dropped like a grenade in the middle of the table. Mom gasped. Mia whispered, No. Dad just stared at me. You're making a mistake. No, I said. You made it. When you chose to crown a daydream and discard your workhorse. Let Mia handle the next crisis. Let her talk her way through supplier negotiations. Let her explain quarterly losses to the board. She owns it, right? I turned to leave. My hands were shaking, but my spine had never felt straighter. Behind me, no one moved. No one said a word. They just watched me walk out. Like they always did. I woke up the next morning in a haze, the kind that settles in after you've detonated your entire life. The sun poured into my apartment like it always did. Relentless, indifferent. My alarm didn't go off, because for the first time in 10 years, I hadn't set one. I lay there in bed, still in the clothes I'd worn the night before, and stared at the ceiling. Blank. White. Mocking. No emails to check. No meetings to prepare. No fires to put out. No expectations. No schedule. No idea what the hell I was supposed to do now. I was free. It felt like drowning. My phone buzzed, but I didn't move. It buzzed again. I finally glanced at the screen. 3 texts. 1 missed call. All from Cheryl. Ironic, since she was one of the voices in the hallway, laughing about how I just worked. She wanted to know if I was really gone. I didn't respond. I wandered to the kitchen and poured myself coffee, forgetting that the machine was still filled with grounds from 3 days ago. It tasted like burnt guilt. I dumped it in the sink. I walked in circles around the apartment, tried to start a to-do list, scratched it out, checked my email, emptied my inbox, stared at the wall. Who was I without that calendar? Without the back-to-back calls, the 2 a.m. revisions, the adrenaline that came from saving something only I knew how to fix? Who was I if no one needed me? The silence was unbearable. I felt like a balloon that had been untied and released, flying nowhere, spinning wildly, leaking everything I thought made me real. I picked up the phone and called Lara. She answered on the second ring. Vic? Hey, I croaked. I didn't realize I was crying until I heard it in my voice. I quit. I know, she said gently. Cheryl called my sister. It's already gossip. Of course it is. You okay? No. I laughed bitterly. I don't know who I am without that place. I don't even know what to do with myself. There was a pause. You come over, now. I'm making pancakes. You're eating them. Lara? Nope. No arguments. Shower. Come. I have syrup and a bottle of that weird orange wine you like. You're going to sit on my couch and remember that you're a human being. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Okay. I called Sasha next. She was still in LA, probably halfway through her Pilates class, but she picked up, breathless. Vicky, you alive? Barely. I'm flying out this weekend. You don't have to… Shut up, I do. You finally did it. You jumped. I'm not letting you hit the ground alone. The kindness in her voice cracked something in me again. I hung up, curled into a ball on the couch, and tried to breathe. My mind kept spinning. What now? Who am I without Morrow & Co? Was I ever anything else? I'd built my entire life around that company, around my father's praise, my mother's diplomacy, the illusion that loyalty earned legacy. And now it was gone. And all I had was myself. A woman with no title, no salary, no schedule, no map. Just years of exhaustion, a bruised sense of worth, and a voice in her head whispering, "Maybe you were never meant to stay invisible." But another voice, quieter, sadder, murmured, "Then why did you let yourself be?" I didn't have the answers yet, but for the first time in 10 years, I had a day. A blank, empty, terrifying day. And somehow, that had to be enough. The silence in my apartment the morning after felt alive. Heavy, like it was breathing beside me, taunting me. I woke up on the couch, my spine twisted, still dressed in yesterday's blouse, mascara smeared on my pillow like evidence of something broken. The world outside carried on as if nothing had happened. Traffic buzzed, radios played, a dog barked somewhere down the street. But inside me, everything had stopped. For the first time in 10 years, I had no calendar alerts, no unread emails, no Monday morning panic. I had no one expecting me to solve a crisis. No fire to put out, no spreadsheet to audit. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like I'd been hollowed out. I wandered to the kitchen, poured a cup of lukewarm coffee, and stood staring at my own reflection in the microwave door. Who was I? Without Morrow & Co., who was I really? The woman who always showed up. The one who cleaned up everyone's messes. The one who fixed what other people broke. The one who stayed late, ate lunch at her desk, and told herself it was all worth it. And now, what? I had no titles, no deadlines, no purpose. And somewhere, Mia was probably leading a meeting in her signature oversized sweater and kitten heels, throwing around vague phrases like synergy and brand harmony, while someone else typed up the minutes she wouldn't read. She never once asked what I did. Never once stayed past 5 p.m. She didn't even know the name of the company's largest vendor. But she owned it. I paced the living room like it might offer answers. I picked up my phone, then put it down. Picked it up again. Then I called Lara. She picked up immediately, like she'd been waiting for the ring. "Vic?" "I don't know who I am," I said, barely above a whisper. "I woke up and I don't know what to do with myself." "You're grieving," she said softly. "You're allowed to not know," I sniffled. "It's like I gave it everything, my time, my life. I built that place. And they just handed it to her." Lara was quiet for a beat. "Come over." "I can't. I don't know if I can face people." "You don't have to. Just me and pancakes. You'll sit on the couch and stare at the wall if that's all you can manage, but not alone." I promised I'd try. Then I called Sasha. She was in LA, but she answered mid-workout, music blasting in the background. "I'll be on a flight Friday," she said before I could even explain. "Bring wine, cry on my shoulder, or scream into a pillow, whatever you need." I didn't deserve friends like them. I'd ghosted birthday parties, skipped weddings, missed too many brunches. All for work, all for nothing. After the calls, I sat back down on the couch. Everything looked the same, but I wasn't. Something in me had cracked wide open, and that's when the voice came. Not loud, not cruel, just present. "Who are you without the company?" I didn't have an answer, because everything I was had been tied to that building, to that name, to my father's opinion. And now that I was out of the picture, Mia filled the space like she'd always belonged there. That was the thing about Mia. She didn't fight for the spotlight. She didn't have to. It just bent toward her like she had gravity. She walked into the office and people turned their heads. She joked, she charmed, she fluttered. She'd say something utterly devoid of substance, and the room would nod like she'd recited a TED Talk. She carried herself like a queen in a crown she hadn't earned. There was no guilt in her eyes when I confronted them. No shame in her voice when she said, "I didn't know the details." Just that glossy concern people put on when they want to seem compassionate without doing anything hard. She said she didn't mean to hurt me, but she never gave the job back, did she? She never once said, "This should be yours." Because deep down, Mia believed she deserved it. Because people had been telling her she was special since the day she was born. And I was told to be responsible, to work hard, to wait my turn. Turns out there wasn't a line. There was just a stage. And they picked the girl with the spotlight in her eyes. I curled into a ball on the couch and cried. Not the quiet kind. The kind that came from the stomach, from the bone. Because I didn't just lose a job. I lost the version of myself I'd built my entire identity around. And now I had to figure out who I was. Without their approval. Without the business. Without the lie. By Wednesday, the silence turned into noise. It pulsed in my ears like static. Unspoken thoughts. Unfinished plans. A loop of everything I could have said at that dinner table. I was pacing my apartment in a daze, alternating between opening the fridge and forgetting why, checking my phone and pretending I didn't want to see my father's name there. But nothing came. And that hurt the most. How quiet they all were after I walked out. No calls, no text, not even a guilt-drenched voice message from Mia. As if I had been a secretary, not a daughter, a placeholder, not a partner. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I picked up my phone and did what I should have done days ago. I called Ray. Raymond Ellis had been more of a mentor to me than my own father ever was. He was the one who taught me to read between the lines of contracts. The one who once told me, "A legacy isn't built on blood, it's built on backbone." He had seen my potential before anyone else did. Maybe even before I did. He answered with a low, steady "Victoria." Just my name, but somehow it said, "I know." "I don't know what to do," I said. "I do," he replied. "Come see me." By late afternoon, I was driving up the coast, the ocean on my left, salt in the air, my thoughts unraveling in the space between gears. Ray's house was perched on a bluff in Santa Cruz, a peaceful place far from glass towers and boardrooms, filled with light and books and old jazz records. He opened the door in a hoodie and bare feet, handed me coffee without a word, and led me to the porch. We sat overlooking the water as the sky shifted from gold to gray. "I quit," I told him, the words still tasting unfamiliar. "I know," he said, "and I know why. Now tell me what you're going to do about it." "That's the thing," I whispered. "I don't know. I feel like I've been erased." He nodded slowly. "You weren't erased. You were ignored. There's a difference, and you're not staying invisible anymore, which is good." "It doesn't feel good." I didn't say it would. I looked out at the ocean, waves breaking against rocks with effortless certainty. "I keep wondering if I made it all up, if I imagined my value." Ray turned toward me. "Then prove you didn't. Write it down, all of it." "You mean what I did for the company?" "No," he said with a quiet smile. "I mean what the company did because of you. Don't just write a resume, write your history, create a ledger of your life, own it, see it with your own eyes." I didn't know what to say, so I nodded. That night, I went home and opened my laptop. The screen glared at me, blank and brutal. I titled the document, "What I Built," and I started typing. At first, it felt ridiculous, listing contracts, client names, numbers. But then, I added context. I wrote about the time I closed the Greystone deal when everyone else thought we'd lost them. I dug up before and after revenue graphs, screenshots of emails where clients had written, "Victoria is the reason we stayed." I documented my system overhauls, staff retention strategies, the mentor program I started in HR that nobody else wanted to run. I wrote about the emergency call I took on Christmas Eve, the overnight pitch deck I built from scratch during a thunderstorm power outage, the 2 vendor relationships I salvaged when Dad almost lost them with his temper. I kept writing. And writing. By 1 a.m., it was over 30 pages long, 30 pages of me. Not the obedient daughter, not the quiet achiever, not the woman in the background, the architect, the engine, the damn foundation. I read through it twice, first with disbelief, then with something like awe. I hadn't been imagining it. I hadn't exaggerated. If anything, I'd understated what I did. The company had grown on my back, and I never noticed how strong I'd become carrying it. Ray texted at 7 a.m. the next morning. Now walk away with your name intact and legally clean. You deserve better. Protect yourself. So I did the next terrifying, empowering thing. I called a lawyer. Not to fight, not to sue, not yet, but to formally leave. The right way, the strong way. We reviewed my employment history, which technically wasn't employment at all. No contracts, no job title, just emails and decades of assumption. She helped me craft an official letter of departure. We reviewed NDAs, tax records, intellectual contributions. She flagged a few things that might require negotiation, things I had created that the company now used under Mia's branding. She called it asset entanglement. I called it theft. I signed the papers with a pen I didn't realize I was gripping so tightly until it snapped. It was done. The break wasn't just emotional now, it was legal. Real. I wasn't theirs anymore. And maybe, just maybe, I never had been. But now I belonged to someone else, to myself. It started small. A missed follow-up email. A client left on read. A billing discrepancy that no one could explain. At first, I only heard about it in whispers. Texts from Cheryl, passive-aggressive LinkedIn updates from former coworkers, hinting at chaos under new leadership. Then came the phone calls. I let them ring. By the second week after I left, the storm was no longer containable. Morrow and Copesters was floundering. Apparently, Mia had scheduled a rebrand meeting with the Hartwell account and forgotten to include their project lead. She showed up in a bright orange pantsuit, gave a presentation that included phrases like emotional synergy, and ended with trust the vibes. They didn't. 2 days later, Hartwell pulled $1.2 million in projected contracts off the table, pending structural clarification. The staff was panicking. Mia was unreachable for most of the week, reportedly working remotely from a boutique hotel that offered herbal facials and creative recalibration suites. And my father? Radio silent. The man who used to call me in a rage when we were out of toner hadn't said a word. I sat on my couch in a sweater I hadn't worn since college, legs curled under me, sipping tea instead of stress. The days were quiet. My body was still learning to unclench. My inbox was finally empty. My nights didn't end with ulcers. And yet, when my phone buzzed and I saw the name Arthur Wynn flash across the screen, my stomach dropped. Arthur Wynn was our biggest client. Correction, my biggest client. I had brought them in, pitched them myself, managed them personally. I knew the birthdays of both his kids and how he took his espresso. Arthur was a shark in the boardroom, but with me, he was always warm, direct, respectful. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Arthur, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Victoria, he replied, a beat too fast. Thank God. I didn't say anything. Let the silence ask the question for me. There was a sigh. Then, look, I know you're not with them anymore, but I had to call. Things are not going well. I could hear the tightness in his throat, the unspoken fear. I'm aware, I said calmly, though I'm not sure why you're calling me. Because I trusted you, he said, because the only reason we ever signed with Morrow was you. I closed my eyes. I remembered the night I closed the Wynn deal. How I stayed up redoing the proposal deck after Mia had accidentally deleted the final version. How I personally flew to Boston on 2 hours of sleep, negotiated across 2 time zones, and turned the deal around in a weekend. Arthur continued, We're reconsidering the partnership. Mia's, well, she's very enthusiastic, but it's chaos. Nobody seems to know who's in charge, or what's going on. I could picture it. Her giving them wide, sparkling eyes and buzzwords like brand freshness and user feeling, thinking charm was enough. I'm sorry, Arthur, I said gently, but I'm no longer affiliated with Morrow & Co. There was a long pause. You don't sound surprised. I'm not. He exhaled slowly. If you ever consider starting something new, you call me. We'd follow you in a heartbeat. It hit me in the chest. The offer. The vote of confidence. The idea that maybe I wasn't just holding up the company, maybe I was the company. Thank you, I said. I'll keep that in mind. When I hung up, I stared at the ceiling. The same ceiling I'd cried under not long ago. They were unraveling. The very thing they told me I was too rigid to lead was crumbling without me. The future they chose was improvising through deadlines and hemorrhaging trust. My father had bet on sparkle instead of structure, and he was losing. But the strangest thing? I wasn't rushing in. I wasn't putting out fires or fixing broken systems or running in with a folder of solutions. I was still, watching it all collapse from a safe distance, letting Mia fix it. She's the owner, right? Let her make the midnight calls. Let her chase the numbers. Let her learn what it means to hold a sinking ship steady when no one believes you can. For once, the disaster wasn't mine to contain, and for the first time in a decade, I let it burn. He knocked just after 6 p.m. I didn't recognize the sound at first. It was too polite, too hesitant. For a moment, I thought it might be a neighbor, someone needing a cup of sugar, or asking if I'd seen their missing Amazon package. But when I opened the door, it was him. My father. Still dressed like a titan of industry, though the edges were frayed. His tie was perfectly knotted, but his eyes were rimmed with sleeplessness. His shoes were shined, but he looked like a man who'd forgotten what ground he stood on. "Victoria," he said, voice low, uncertain. I stared at him for a moment, then stepped aside. He walked in like he'd never seen my apartment before, like he hadn't really expected me to have a life outside the office. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on the bookshelves, the coffee mug with "Not Your Assistant" in pink cursive, the plant he probably thought was fake. "This is nice," he offered. I didn't respond. I didn't offer him a drink. He sat down on the edge of my couch, like it might judge him. Then he looked up. "I want to talk about the company." Of course he did. I figured. He cleared his throat. "We need you back." It took everything in me not to flinch. "I see." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, the way he did when he was preparing to negotiate. The same posture I'd seen him use with multi-million-dollar clients. Only now, the pitch was directed at me. "I can offer you a substantial salary," he began. "6 figures, a formal title, full oversight of operations. You'll have autonomy, under my leadership, of course, but I'll give you the recognition you've been asking for." I tilted my head. "A salary, a title, under your command." "It's a fair offer, Victoria." "No," I said softly. "It's not." His jaw clenched, but he didn't interrupt. "For 10 years, I worked without pay, without benefits, without a job description. I was expected to know everything, fix everything, absorb everything, and I did it. You told me I was the future. Then you rewrote that future and didn't even tell me." He didn't deny it. "You gave it to Mia. She has potential. She has chaos. She has a list of clients ready to walk." He winced, barely, but I saw it. "Arthur Wynne called me," I continued. "So did the Collins Group, and 3 other names I won't mention yet. They're nervous. They see the cracks. She needs time. She had time, and she filled it with color palettes and buzzwords. You handed her a kingdom she doesn't know how to rule. And now you want me to come back and clean it up again, quietly, without complaint. For a paycheck?" He leaned back slowly, as if the air had gotten heavier. "You're angry." "No," I said. "I'm done." He stared at me. Something shifted in his face then. Fear? Realization? "I'm not coming back as your shadow," I said. "I'm not your backup plan. If you want me, if you truly want me back, then these are my conditions." He straightened. I want 40% equity, not stock options, ownership. I want a seat on the board, a vote, a voice that counts. I will not report to you. I will operate as a partner. And I want boundaries. No more nights spent fixing your messes. No more emergencies at midnight. I want a life, A schedule that reflects my value. His face darkened. That's more than fair, I cut in. You gave Mia 75% without blinking. I'm asking for less than half in exchange for saving the very thing she's setting on fire. You'd really walk away, he said quietly. I already did, I said, and I'm not crawling back. His hands twitched on his lap. You have other offers. I do. You'd go to a competitor? I'd go where I'm wanted, where my work is seen, where I don't have to beg for acknowledgement. He stared at the floor for a long time. And for once, he didn't look like the man who built an empire. He looked like the man who let his legacy slip through his fingers. Finally, he stood. I'll speak with the board. I stood too. Do that. At the door, he turned. His face softened, just for a moment. You've changed. No, I said. I finally stopped apologizing for being strong. He left without another word. And as the door clicked shut, I felt no guilt, no fear, only power, finally. We met at a quiet Italian restaurant tucked into the corner of a downtown street I used to pass every day on my walk to the office. Funny how I'd never noticed it before. Or maybe I had, but I'd been too focused, too buried in numbers and expectations to lift my head and taste the world outside spreadsheets. Now I was here, not as the fixer, not as the daughter with something to prove, but as the woman who said no. The woman they needed. They were already seated when I walked in. My father looked up immediately, that reflexive flicker of control still embedded in his posture. My mother smiled, nervous and tired, like she was bracing herself for impact. Mia sat beside them, smaller than I remembered, less confident, less polished, as if the weeks without me had aged her in a way youth and privilege could no longer protect. I didn't smile. I took my seat across from them, smoothed my jacket, and waited. Mia was the first to speak. I'm sorry, she said, and to her credit, she didn't try to soften it with excuses. I thought I could handle it. I really believed I could just step in and figure it out as I went. But I was wrong. I didn't understand what you were holding up all those years. She looked up at me then, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not the fear of failure, but the fear of finally seeing herself without illusion. You were the backbone, she said. I was just the paint. I didn't reply. Not yet. My father leaned forward next. I made a mistake, he said. A serious one. I thought I was protecting the company, protecting the future, by putting Mia in charge. I thought you'd always be there, holding things together no matter what. I took you for granted. We all did. It was strange, hearing him say those words aloud. I had imagined them in every variation over the past few weeks, whispered, shouted, delivered as a confession or a plea. But now that they were here, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. He continued, We'd like to propose a new structure, something that reflects your value, formally, legally. My mother chimed in, always the diplomat. We've spoken to the board. We'd like to offer you 35% equity, a seat at the table, official partnership, you and Mia as equals. She retains 40%, but you'll split operational leadership, separate departments, equal authority. And terms? I asked. My voice was calm, sharp. Reforms, Mia said quickly. No more martyrdom culture. 45 hours a week max. Mandatory vacation. Oversight structures. HR cleaned up. Real accountability. I let it all hang in the air for a moment. Then I leaned back in my chair. It's a good offer, I said. Reasonable. Late, but reasonable. We're trying to make it right, my mother said gently. I know, I replied, and I'll accept. With everything in writing, signed, filed. If we're going to rebuild, it has to be done with integrity. They nodded. We shook hands like business people, civil, final. But as we sat through the rest of dinner, salads we barely touched, entrees we picked at between formal conversation, I felt the tightness in my chest refuse to loosen. The offer was fair. The apology was overdue. The structure was right. But my heart? It wasn't ready to forgive. Even as Mia talked about her lessons learned, even as my father admitted to overlooking me, even as my mother tried to fill the silence with soft, well-meaning warmth, I felt it there, sitting beside me like a shadow at the table. Resentment. Not just for what they did, but for how easily they moved on now that they needed me again. For the years I gave that they couldn't return. For the birthdays I missed. The relationships I sacrificed. The version of myself I lost trying to be enough. I watched Mia laugh a little too loudly at something my father said, her eyes flicking toward me, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be comfortable again. I wasn't sure either, because even though the terms had changed, on paper, in practice, the wound still bled. It would for a while, but at least now I had a bandage, a nameplate, a stake, and control over how the rest of my story would be written. Walking back into the office wasn't triumphant. It wasn't fireworks and applause. It was quiet, grounded, like stepping into a house I'd helped build, only to find someone had rearranged the furniture and left the lights off. But I was home, finally, on my terms. I didn't come in through the side entrance anymore. I used the front. My name was now etched on the executive wall across from Mia's. Equal font size, equal weight. And that wasn't just symbolic, it was earned. The agreement had been signed. The board approved. Mia and I had clearly divided responsibilities. Paula, as she now formally called herself at work, her way of shedding the little sister role and stepping fully into adulthood, was now creative director. She handled everything visual, everything abstract, everything visionary. And me, I ran the engine, budgets, contracts, hiring, deadlines, partnerships. Operations were mine, and for the first time, no one questioned that. Not even my father. Especially not Mia. To our surprise, maybe even our relief, it worked. She came to me with ideas, not demands. I came to her with structure, not criticism. There were disagreements, yes, but they were strategic, not emotional. We weren't jostling for approval anymore. We were actually collaborating. I'll admit, there were days I still carried my armor to the office. Old instincts. I expected resistance, manipulation, something to go wrong. But the system we built forced transparency, real HR, weekly partner check-ins, leadership retreats that didn't feel like corporate punishment. Slowly, the resentment didn't disappear, but it diluted into something more manageable, something I could set down when I walked out the door. And I did walk out the door. At 5 o'clock, on time, because now I had a life again, a real one. I started small, long walks in the park without my phone buzzing, reading a novel over breakfast, saying yes to social invitations without guilt hanging off every syllable. Then I took it further. I took a trip to Greece, alone. I booked a room with a balcony overlooking the sea. I wore linen and let my hair frizz. I swam until my skin puckered, ordered wine I couldn't pronounce, and flirted with a local bartender who made me laugh so hard I cried. And for once, no one called me with an urgent situation. No midnight reports. No damage control. Because I'd trained people to trust me, and more importantly, to trust themselves. That was my real legacy. Not just the systems I built, but the people I grew. When I got home, I got a library card. I started painting again. Badly, messily, joyfully. I started dating. Not networking, not interviewing. Dating. Casual coffees that turned into dinners. Real connection, not another way to prove I was worthy. My phone stayed in my purse more often than not. I finally had room to breathe. And then, one afternoon, my father called me into his office. His new space was smaller, tucked into a quieter corner of the building. Advisory title. No real power anymore, by his own choice. A place for him to observe, not control. He gestured to the chair across from him. I sat. He studied me for a moment. "You're different," he said. "Calmer." I smiled. "I'm not running on adrenaline anymore." He nodded. I wanted to say something about this new structure, About you and Paula. I waited. It's better. It's healthier. You're building something I never could. You're balancing. For once, his voice didn't carry authority, just reflection. You were always the one holding it together, he said. I just didn't want to see it. I didn't need to say, I know. He knew I knew. He stood, held out his hand. Not paternal, professional. I'm proud of you, he added. I shook his hand. I didn't say thank you, because his pride wasn't a gift I needed anymore. It was simply something he finally recognized. I walked out of his office and back into mine, feeling taller than I ever had, even in heels. Later that evening, I packed up on time. No crisis, no guilt. I had a dinner reservation with someone who liked me because I talked about books and politics and the weird goat I met in Mykonos, not because I could interpret a balance sheet in my sleep. And as I walked out into the golden haze of evening, I realized something simple but profound. I wasn't just running the company. I was living. I had built something that was mine, not inherited, not gifted, not carved out of guilt or silence, but earned. Brick by brick, choice by choice. Victoria Morrow, co-owner, partner, woman, human being. And finally, whole.